At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. I mean, in the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name is the Voice Ogre, and let's begin. The world was going to end over a rock. It wasn't an impressive rock, just a fist-sized chunk of iron-rich regolith, pitted by millennia of cosmic radiation. But this was a genuine, straight-from-the-source asteroid rock, and 8-year-old Kala Rostov craved one for her collection. Her mother, Nia, a medic on the new Aurora mining habitat, promised to bring one home. That promise put Nia wrist-deep in a collapsed corridor, working to free a trapped miner named Kai. A failed support beam pinned his leg.
"Hold on, Kai,"
Nia said. She kept her voice even, a deliberate counterpoint to the groaning metal symphony around them. She pressed a painkiller injector to his dusty pressure suit.
"Kaya wants a real rock. You're camped in a whole quarry, so I'm getting you out of here."
Kai gave a pained, breathy laugh.
So, I'll gift up a...
A low, insistent whine built in the habitat's superstructure, a sound that vibrated deep in Nia's jaw. A low-priority alert, likely another micrometeorite that pinged off the outer hull. Annoying, but routine. The routine ended. The whine climbed to a full-throated, gut-wrenching scream. An alarm klaxon so primal and terrifying that no one on New Aurora had ever heard it. The corridor lights flickered, died, and gave way to the red pulse of emergency strobes. Through a reinforced viewport down the hall, the star-dusted blackness of space tore itself open. A single, incandescent sliver of rage, a Growl Reaper-class missile, materialized from hyperspace. The thing was crude and ugly, a piece of cheap, mass-produced military hardware that bungled its one job and was about to succeed spectacularly at another. Its guidance system suffered a sequence of failures, a 1 in a billion probability, a cosmic wrong turn, but its new trajectory was as undeniable as gravity. Nia looked up. The strobing red light illuminated raw disbelief on her face. Her comm remained active on an open emergency channel that broadcast her every breath to the local system. The expression curdled, then melted into a fury as ancient and profound as the species itself. White fire consumed the world outside the viewport. Her last defiant scream, raw with a billion years of defiance, echoed across the system. A final guttural testament to a terrible mistake.
"You fucked up now!"
The UN Security Council chamber on Earth held a silence so deep you could hear the life support vents sigh. 100 feet tall on the main holographic display, Nia Rostov's final moments played in a silent, horrifying loop. Every news network from Mars to the Kuiper Belt scrubbed, amplified, and replayed the audio. Her final 4 words, however, blared from every speaker. They hung in the sterile, chilled air like a death sentence, an accusation, and a prophecy. Dr. Zaila Romas stood at the podium, a ghost in a tailored suit. She was the architect of the Concord of Observers, the policy of neutrality that had just catastrophically failed. The weight of 30,000 ghosts pressed on her shoulders, each a testament to her naivete. She had argued, she had lobbied and convinced humanity that survival depended on avoiding the galaxy's forever war between the Graal and the Kailen. She was wrong. Beside her, Admiral Hideo Park watched the screen. His face seemed to drink the room's light and revealed nothing. His knuckles were white where he gripped the empty chair's back. The clip had become more than news. It was a spark. A single, furious spark in a planetary powder keg generations in the making. On every screen in every bar, apartment, and public square in the Sol system, Nia Rostov's face became a symbol. The first wave of universal grief already curdled into a cold, directed rage humanity hadn't felt since clawing its way from the gravity well. "The Graal ambassador is waiting," Park said, his voice a low rumble. His gaze remained locked on the silent scream. "He requests an immediate audience." Romas nodded, her throat too tight for words. She felt every delegate's eyes on her, then saw more than a diplomat. They saw a failure, and they waited to see what she would do. The meeting room was a sterile white box, a design that eliminated distractions and listening devices. This sterility only amplified the Graal ambassador Grohl's sheer physical presence. It was a mountain of muscle and fur, an ursine creature from a species that measured honor in tonnage and considered diplomacy a subset of ballistics. He bypassed condolences and offered a statement.
A regrettable incident,
Grohl rumbled, his voice a low vibration, full of gravel and friction. He explained the sequence of malfunctions in the missile's guidance system during a hyperlane transition. The technical explanation came with the emotional investment of a mechanic describing a faulty fuel injector. He presented a data slate.
The Graal Collective offers reparations. The sum reflects the settlement's projected economic output, adjusted for the loss of life per standard galactic indemnity tables.
Romas stared at the data slate, then back at the ambassador. His dark, beady eyes showed the profound annoyance of a giant who'd accidentally stepped on an anthill and now must deal with the paperwork.
An accident of war,
Grohl continued, his tone suggesting the matter was closed.
Your settlement occupied a volatile region. You were observers. You observed. You will accept this compensation, and we will all move on.
A cold, pointed anger solidified in Wren's chest. It was a block of absolute zero, a perfect geometric structure of fury.
Ambassador, she said, 30,000 human beings are dead.
Yes,
Grohl said, blinking slowly.
the indemnity tables are quite generous on that point. We rounded up.
The concept eluded him. To him, they were a statistic, an inconvenience, an accounting error a credit transfer would correct. Romas slid the data slate back across the table.
We refuse the compensation.
Grohl's massive head tilted.
This is illogical. The offer is final.
And so is our refusal.
Romas said as she stood. The block of ice in her chest seemed to radiate cold.
The matter remains open.
Hours later, a different predator occupied the sterile white box. Emissary Vespara of the Silent Dominion was the Graal's opposite. She was slender and graceful. Her long limbs moved with an avian delicacy. Her species prized intellect and manipulation, and viewed the galaxy as a complex game of Go. Direct confrontation was the clumsy tactic of simple-minded brutes. Vespera tilted her head. Her eyes, twin pools of polished jet that reflected the room in unsettling detail, caught the light in a display of sorrow so perfect it was an insult.
Such a tragedy,
she cooed.
to be caught in the crossfire of such brutes. This proves what we have always known, Dr. Wren. Neutrality is a fragile shield.
She let the words hang, a silken net in the air. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement.
Perhaps you need a stronger power for your protection. An alliance. The Dominion could offer its fleet, its technology. We could ensure that such an accident never happens again.
The offer was clear and insulting. Become a protectorate, a vassal state, a tool for use against the Graal. Romas felt a moment of chilling clarity. Grohl saw humanity as an accidentally crushed anthill. Vespera saw them as a stick to poke the bear. Neither saw 30,000 dead people. They both saw an opportunity, a resource to placate or claim.
Your concern is noted, emissary,
Romas said, her diplomatic training surfacing to form a wall of polite, empty words.
Of course,
Vespera said, rising with a fluid grace.
Take your time to grieve, but grieve quickly. The galaxy moves on from those who cannot choose a side.
As the door hissed shut behind the emissary, Romas allowed herself a single, shuddering breath. They were trapped. A bear and a snake had them cornered, and both saw humanity as helpless prey. From the Earth's pristine diplomatic halls, Renzo Carrick had a very different meeting in a sprawling zero-gravity workshop that orbited Titan like a metallic barnacle. His only attendees were a half-disassembled fusion core, a grumpy welding drone named Sparky, and a flickering monitor displaying the same viral clip of Nia Rostov. The raw, unfiltered audio cut through his plasma torch's hiss.
You fucked up now!
You're goddamn right they did.
Renzo muttered. He slammed his torch on a workbench, grabbed the nearest heavy object, a Class 3 hyperspanner, and hurled it with all his might across the cavernous bay. It spun end over end in the microgravity and finally clanged harmlessly off a decommissioned core's side. The rage remained, but it found a conduit. The chaotic energy in his chest sharpened. His intelligent eyes flicked from the looping video to a schematic on his main console. A Series 9 cargo hauler, a space truck, ugly, reliable, and utterly unremarkable. With quick, angry movements, his fingers jabbed and swiped at the holographic interface. His hands moved with cold purpose. It worked. He dragged and dropped new components onto the blueprint. Military-grade drone racks from a decommissioned Seoul Defense Force patrol cutter. A jury-rigged sensor jamming suite that he'd designed last year for a smuggler who paid him in rare earth metals, and a case of 20-year-old Martian whiskey. Mounts for repurposed asteroid mining lasers, tweaked for tighter, more destructive bursts. He ignored thoughts of war, patriotism, flags, and geopolitics. He focused on a problem, a very big, loud, furry problem that broke something that should have remained intact. Grief was the high-octane fuel. Anger was the spark plug. And his beautiful, chaotic, brilliant mind was an engine that just turned over. Admiral Park found Zaila Romas in her office late that night. She stared at a static image of New Aurora taken a week before the attack. A jewel box of inhabitants, docking arms, nestled in a massive asteroid's heart, glowing with the light of 30,000 souls. Park skipped the pleasantries. He laid out the grim reality, his voice low and stripped of emotion.
The Seoul Defense Force consists of 12 destroyers and 4 heavy cruisers. Our primary mandate is a system defense. The Graal border fleet, the one that launched the missile, has 50 capital ships, and as before, counting their support craft and fighter wings. A conventional war is more than suicide, Zyla. It's a statistical footnote. We would be a rounding error in their casualty reports.
Romas finally tore her gaze from the image. Her eyes were hollow, cavernous, but a single, frightening ember burned deep inside them.
Well, then we fight an unconventional war,
she said. Her voice was thin, almost fragile, but it didn't break. Park raised an eyebrow.
What other kind is there?
The kind that they have yet to name,
Romas replied, turning to face him fully.
We don't declare war. Declarations are for governments with fleets. We don't have a fleet. What we have is 15 billion angry, inventive, and very, very well-connected people. We don't try to win. We try to become an unacceptable variable. We become a bigger, more terrifying, more annoying, and more expensive problem than their actual enemy.
Park stared at her. The diplomat who championed peace at any cost was gone. In her place stood a stranger. Someone who looked at the chessboard of galactic war and planned to ignore the rules. She planned to chew up the pieces and set the board on fire.
What are you proposing?
He asked. A knot of professional dread and morbid curiosity tightened in his gut.
I'm proposing,
she said, her voice dropping to a whisper colder than the vacuum outside,
that we teach the galaxy a new definition for the term planetary hornet's nest.
The idea bypassed government directives and began as a file upload. Renzo Carrick, fueled by rage and caffeine, finalized his Stinger drone design. A cheap, fast, 3D printable frame built around a repurposed mining charge and a simple logic board. He uploaded the open-source schematics to a popular engineering forum with a one-line comment.
They broke our stuff. Let's go break theirs.
Within a day, the files were mirrored 1 million times. Within 3 days, engineers in Mumbai and Nairobi live-streamed their first successful prints from backyard workshops, holding up the spidery, menacing drone chassis like trophies. The schematics evolved in real time as thousands of anonymous collaborators suggested improvements for power routing, targeting algorithms, and material composition. The outrage was a virus, and humanity's interconnected network was the perfect host. In the asteroid belt, grizzled miners, whose cousins and friends were on New Aurora, networked their seismic survey charges. They bypassed simple bombs for something more ambitious, a coordinated, system-wide minefield controlled by a shared, encrypted spreadsheet. The big shipping corporations, with their fleets of FTL-capable freighters, initially tried to remain neutral. Then, their pilots, members of a fiercely independent and notoriously stubborn guild, threatened a general strike. One Martian shipping magnate, Alastair Kane, went on the Solnet and publicly refused to commit his fleet, citing corporate neutrality and fiduciary duty to his shareholders. The response was instantaneous and utterly brutal. Within 24 hours, his company's stock was in freefall. Social media organized a global boycott of all of his subsidiaries, from luxury shuttles to cheap atmospheric couriers, in under an hour. A live feed of his own pilots painting Nia Rostov's last words in giant, furious letters on his prized super fighter's hulls became the #1 stream in the system. Kane caved. He released a tearful statement about his profound, belated sense of civic duty and volunteered his entire fleet. The mobilization erupted from the bottom up. It happened without orders or conscription notices, a leaderless, chaotic swarm intelligence that moved with terrifying purpose. Humanity bypassed building an army. It became one. Romas stood before the UN General Assembly. This time, the chamber buzzed with a tense, angry energy. The broadcast went out live, to the Sol system and the entire galaxy. She spoke without the measured tone of a diplomat. Her voice was cold, steady, and sharp enough to cut diamond. She formally, publicly rejected the Graal's blood money. She formally, publicly dismissed the Kylan's veiled protection threats. Earth is not declaring war, she announced, her eyes finding the broadcast censor. She spoke to Grohl. She spoke to Vespera. War is a state that exists between militaries. This is a matter of consequence. She paused to let the words sink in. From this moment on, humanity operates under a new directive. We call it the Sol Doctrine. Any faction, state, or entity that destroys human life or property will face disproportionate, decentralized, and unpredictable consequences until such time as we, and we alone, deem the matter concluded. The Ad Hoc Emergency Coalition's first meeting was a spectacular clash of cultures. It happened in a secure bunker deep beneath UN headquarters, a place of cold steel and colder coffee. On one side of the table sat Admiral Park and his decorated senior officers, their uniforms crisp, their faces grim. They presented orthodox attack plans on the holographic display, fleet maneuvers, flanking actions, capital ship engagements. Every plan ended with the annihilation of the Sol Defense Force in under an hour. These projections, one of Park's captains said stiffly, they all indicate a 100% casualty rate for our forces. A flickering, life-size hologram crackled to life at the head of the table. Renzo Carrick beamed in from his Titan workshop. He wore a grease-stained t-shirt and held a half-eaten protein gel packet. He laughed, openly, a harsh sound. Of course they do, you absolute penguins, he said, gesturing at the screen with his food packet. You think like them. You try to play chess with the guy who owns the whole damn board and prints the rules on the box. Stop thinking about the ships. We don't have ships. Park's face tightened. What we have, Mr. Carrick, are 12 destroyers and 4 cruisers.
No, Admiral,
Renzo shot back, his hologram leaning forward conspiratorially.
what we have are 10,000 delivery trucks with FTL drives and a very bad attitude. What we have are 500,000 backyard workshops with 3D printers. What we have is every pissed-off asteroid miner from here to the Oort cloud. You try to punch a mountain, right? I suggest we give it a terminal case of space termites.
He swiped his hand, and the military projections vanished. A chaotic, almost incomprehensible schematic of shipping lanes and resource depots replaced them.
We don't fight their fleet.
His voice dropping, suddenly serious.
We starve it, unplug it. We make it the most powerful, most expensive, and most useless pile of junk in the galaxy.
He tapped a single point in the map, a swirling vortex of color.
And we start right here.
After 3 days of heated, often profane debate, they had their target. Renzo called it the Griffin's Clutch. It was a massive, fully automated Grawl refueling and rearming station. The logistical linchpin for their entire sector fleet. It sat deep inside the treacherous electromagnetic currents of a dense nebula, a place where sensors went haywire and navigation was a nightmare. It was a vulnerability hidden in plain sight. A sane commander would avoid risking their billion-credit capital ships in the nebulous hazards. The Grawl fortified it against a fleet assault, not an infestation.
Taking it out won't win the war.
Park conceded, staring at the swirling nebula on the display. The by-the-book commander in him screamed that this was insane.
Who cares about winning the war?
Renzo shot back.
We're in the make them regret it business. This cripples their offensive capabilities for months. It forces them to pull back, to reroute their entire supply chain. It is a broken leg. It is not a knockout blow. And it sends a message. Nowhere is safe.
Ren, who listened silently, finally spoke.
That's the perfect target,
she said, her eyes fixed on the display.
It's military infrastructure, so the rest of the galaxy will see it as a legitimate, if unconventional, act of war. But its audacity, its sheer unlikelihood, will also serve as a warning.
A warning that the anthill had teeth. The Ghost Fleet gathered in Jupiter's gravitational shadow, a place prying eyes rarely looked. It was the ugliest, most motley collection of vessels ever assembled. Converted bulk freighters, their cargo bays now lined with makeshift drone launch racks. Deep space construction rigs, their powerful manipulator arms retrofitted to launch salvos of repurposed mining charges. Grizzled, battered ore haulers, their hulls scarred by 1,000 asteroid impacts, now bristled with salvaged point defense cannons. The fleet assembled under the cover of the Great Noise, a system-wide broadcast of ghost signals and spoofed transponders that Renzo's team had thrown together in a caffeine-fueled haze. To any long-range passive sensors, the Sol system's traffic appeared completely normal, even boring. The 200 ships of the Ghost Fleet, their transponders screaming that they were simple ice haulers and colony transports, became part of the background static, hiding in plain sight. On the bridge of the mighty Centaur, a repurposed freighter that usually hauled agricultural equipment to the outer colonies, Renzo Carrick directed the chaos like a mad composer. Civilian crews in mismatched pressure suits welded salvaged armor plates to cargo containers. Thousands of his freshly printed Stinger drones were loaded into converted shipping modules, stacked like angry, explosive eggs. The space hummed with the manic, defiant energy, the gallows humor of people on a probably one-way trip who were going anyway. Admiral Park observed the madhouse from the bridge of his command ship, the SDF Valiance, which hovered at a professionally safe distance. Every instinct in his body screamed at the lack of discipline, the sheer chaos. These weren't sailors. They were truckers, miners, and mechanics. Their ships had no coordinated fire control, no proper combat information center. But as he watched them work, a glimmer of something he had missed for weeks sparked within him. This was organized, weaponized rage, not warfare as he knew it. While Renzo prepared a physical assault, Romas engaged in her own warfare. Her battlefield was the intricate web of galactic diplomacy and intelligence. Through back channels she'd spent a decade cultivating, she contacted a minor, neutral species called the Tessellates, a race of avian traders who dealt heavily with the Kailin. She remained anonymous. She simply leaked a carefully fabricated intelligence packet. It contained sensor readings, patrol schedules, and encrypted communications, all expertly faked by Earth's top cryptographers. The packet suggested a massive Graal fleet was secretly massing near a supposedly demilitarized zone on the far side of Kailin territory for a surprise attack. The lie was beautiful. It preyed upon the Kailin's defining trait, their deep-seated paranoia and their belief that everyone else was as cunning and deceitful as they were. As predicted, the Kailin Dominion swallowed the bait whole. High Command diverted key reconnaissance assets, long-range sensors, and stealth pickets to investigate the Ghost Fleet. For a critical 72-hour window, the sector that helmed the Griffin's clutch became a blind spot. The snake looked the wrong way. The attack on the Griffin's clutch began with 1,000 silent tears in the fabric of space. The Ghost Fleet jumped into the nebula not in a disciplined arrangement, but in a chaotic, staggered wave. One moment the nebula was empty. The next, it was filled with the hard-edged, ugly shapes of 200 civilian vessels that materialized at random coordinates all over the region. The Graal station's automated defenses, programmed to identify and target the energy signatures and flight profiles of capital ships, were utterly and completely bewildered. Their targeting computers flagged the incoming ships as unidentifiable commercial traffic and geological anomalies. Before the station's AI could resolve its cognitive dissonance, the freighters opened their cargo bays. A plague poured out, not a volley of missiles or a barrage of plasma. Tens of thousands of Stinger drones poured out from the freighters. They swarmed. A cloud of angry, metallic insects descended upon a slumbering beast. They lacked the power to breach the station's main hull, so they attacked its functions. They flew into engine exhausts and clogged them with molten wreckage. They slammed into weapon ports and jammed the turret mechanisms. They detonated on exposed sensor arrays and blinded the station one antenna at a time. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. Amidst the chaos, a specialized squadron of drones, nicknamed the Magpies, executed their primary mission. While the Stingers provided the distraction, the Magpies, faster and more heavily armored, made a suicide run directly for the station's command and control tower. They used shaped charges to punch a single, clean hole through the armored hull, just as Renzo planned. Through that hole, a final, tungsten-reinforced drone, the Breacher, slammed into the tower. Its sole purpose was to locate, secure, and transmit the contents of the station's hardened data core before the station's automated defenses could react. On the bridge of his flagship, the Graal dreadnought Honor's Fist, hundreds of light years away, High Commander Krovis watched the attack unfold on the main viewer. He watched in stunned, disbelieving silence. The human tactics were dishonorable. They were suicidal. They were maddeningly, infuriatingly effective.
What am I seeing?
Sir,
his tactical officer stammered.
they appear to be civilian cargo vessels. They're deploying small, self-propelled munitions, thousands of them.
Send the fleet!
Krovis roared. He slammed a massive, clawed fist into the command console, denting the metal.
They are hours away at maximum jump, Commander. The station, its defenses are ill-configured for this type of assault. They target the individual drones, but there are too many.
Krovis watched as the vital signs of his supply hub, the key to his entire campaign against the Kailin, flickered and died on the screen. Spacefaring vermin and repurposed garbage scows were neutralizing it. His rage was immense, but for the first time in his long career, a profound and unsettling confusion matched it. This felt like pest control, and he was the one being exterminated. The Ghost Fleet limped back to a secret rendezvous point in the empty space between systems. They had won. The Griffin's clutch was a crippled, venting cloud of debris, its fusion cores sputtering out. The automated system silenced forever. The Graal fleet in the sector was effectively stranded. But blood paid for the victory. They'd lost 3 freighters, the Stardust Drifter, the Helios Gamble, and the New Horizon, vaporized by the station's desperate, flailing point defense fire. Dozens of smaller craft were damaged or destroyed. Renzo stood on the bridge of the mighty Centaur and watched the casualty list scroll by on a datapad. The names were volunteer spacers that he had shared coffee and bad jokes with just days before. They weren't serial numbers. Pilots, engineers, cargo masters. The cold technical victory suddenly felt hollow. Triumph curdled into the bitter taste of loss. As he stared at the scrolling names, a message was forwarded to his private terminal. It was a short, unedited video file from the wife of the New Horizons helmsman, a man named Liam Carter. She was a young woman, holding a small, sleeping child on her shoulder. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was impossibly steady. "Renzo," she said, her use of his first name implying years of friendship. "Liam, he believed in what you were doing. He said that it was the first time he felt like he was doing something that mattered more than just hauling cargo." She took a shaky breath. "He said that you were all making it count. So, whatever comes next, make it count." The video ended. Renzo stood there for a long time. The weight of that simple command felt heavier than any dreadnought in the Graal Navy. The data packet from the breacher drone was a mess. A fragmented nightmare of corrupted files and encrypted Graal military code. Back in his workshop orbiting Titan, Renzo and his hand-picked team of coders and hackers, a collection of anti-authoritarian prodigies he'd poached from universities and corporations, worked for 3 days straight to reconstruct it. Finally, they were in. What they found inside was baffling. They went straight to the telemetry logs for the missile that hit New Aurora. The Graal report called it a system failure in the guidance system. The data core told a different story. Deep within the missile's final telemetry logs, just milliseconds before its final, fatal course correction, they discover an anomalous carrier wave, a ghost in the machine. A whisper of a signal buried under layers of Graal encryption. The signal modulation was complex, elegant in a way that brutish Graal technology was not. "This is weird," said a young woman named Kiko, her eyes wide as she stared at the waveform on her screen. "The Graal use brute force frequency hopping. This is phase shifting through a substrate entangled medium. It's like comparing a sledgehammer to a scalpel." Renzo felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "Run it," he said. "Run simulations. Find a match. I don't care how long it takes." It took less than an hour. After running trillions of simulations against every known technological profile in the galactic database, Kiko had a breakthrough. "I got it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Only one known method generates a signal with this exact modulation signature. It requires a specific type of entanglement accelerator." She looked up from her console, her face pale. "It's a proprietary technology, jealously guarded, patented, owned, and exclusively used by the Kylene Dominion." The workshop fell silent. They'd left a technological fingerprint, one only they could produce. It was a frame job, not an accident or Graal incompetence. The revelation sent a shockwave through the emergency coalition. They had been baited, played. The Kylene had orchestrated the attack on New Aurora. They had used their superior technology to subtly nudge a Graal missile off course, all to drag humanity into their war. They wanted to use humanity's chaotic, unpredictable fury as a weapon to weaken their enemy. New Aurora was the first shot in a war by proxy, and humanity was the designated ammunition, not collateral damage. Admiral Park's reaction was one of cold, absolute fury.
They used us,
he bit out, his voice like grinding ice.
They murdered 30,000 of our people to play one of their sick games. I want retaliation.
I want a plan to strike the nearest Kylian outpost now.
But Ren, staring at the complex web of evidence on the main display, saw a different path. The diplomat in her, the one who saw the galaxy as a board of interconnected pieces, reawakened. But this time she was armed with a predator's instinct. "Revenge is a luxury, Admiral," she said, her quiet voice cutting through his anger. "Survival is an opportunity. They wanted us in their war? Fine, they've got us. But we will fight it on our terms, for our benefit. We will end it on ours." Park looked at her, his anger momentarily checked by her chilling calm.
What do you mean, end it?
"I mean," Romas said, a faint, dangerous smile touching her lips for the first time in weeks. "We're about to introduce the Kylian to a concept of unintended consequences." Romas opened a secure, one-time use, subspace entangled channel. The connection was untraceable, a fleeting whisper in the cosmic background noise. The recipient was designated simply as Honor's Fist Command. She sent one thing, the entire, raw, unedited data core retrieved from the Griffin's clutch. Appended to it was the human analysis, a step-by-step breakdown of the Kylian technological fingerprint on the missile's final guidance command. The message attached to the data packet was simple, brutal, and designed to appeal to a warrior's pride. "Commander Corvus, your real enemy played you for a fool. Attached is proof. They are currently moving a fleet through our system under the guise of stabilizing the region and protecting a neutral power. What you do with this information is up to you. Earth." She would cut the connection before any reply could be sent. The bait was in the water. Now, she would see if the shark would bite. Aboard the Honor's Fist, Commander Corvus was seething. The loss of the Griffin's clutch was a strategic disaster and a personal humiliation. Then the human data packet arrived. His first instinct was to delete it, to dismiss it as a pathetic trick by a dishonorable foe.
Debunk this lie,
He snarled at his intelligence officers, projecting the human analysis onto the main bridge screen. He watched them work. His contempt slowly turned to a grudging confusion. His own top analysts confirmed the data core's authenticity with unnerving speed. The data was, without a doubt, from his station. Then came the final, damning report on the ghost signal's modulation.
"Commander?"
His chief analyst stated, his voice trembling slightly with professional outrage.
"The human analysis is correct. This is undeniable Kylian technological markers. The waveform is their signature. There is no other explanation. The missile that struck the human settlement was tampered with, remotely."
A cold, quiet rage, far more potent than his earlier fury, settled over Corvus. The pieces clicked into place. The Kylian immediate offer of protection for the humans, their feigned shock at the Graal's barbarism. It was all a script. He had been played, used as a witless pawn in one of their cowardly, intricate schemes. The unforgivable insult was being made a fool of by the deceitful Kylian, not beaten by the clever, savage little humans. His vendetta, his entire concept of the enemy, shifted in that single moment.
Set a course for the human system,
he commanded, his voice a low growl.
Maximum speed. They want to stabilize the region. We shall provide the stability.
The Kylian punitive fleet, a collection of sleek, deadly warships led by emissary Vespera herself from the bridge of the flagship Inevitability, tore open a series of hyperlane portals at the edge of the Sol system. They expected to meet with token resistance from the tiny Sol Defense Force. A panicked defense they could elegantly brush aside before offering their protection to a grateful, broken humanity. Instead, they met with nothing. No defense fleet, no panicked transmissions, no hails, threats, or pleas. Just the unnerving, profound silence of a system that knew they were there and waited. The long-range sensors showed normal commercial traffic, civilian power relays, and mining operations in the belt. Everything was normal, too normal. Vespra stood on her bridge, a model of poised perfection, but for the first time in her long career, she felt a flicker of genuine unease. This passivity was more threatening than any fleet. The situation felt wrong, like a predator walking into a clearing and finding all the birds have gone silent. The trap was sprung. It was a masterpiece of weaponized industry, a Rube Goldberg machine of total systemic annihilation, not a battle. The trap began with 1,000 brilliant flashes from within the asteroid belt. Hundreds of deep space comms relays, secretly retrofitted by mining guild engineers with high-intensity laser emitters, fired in perfect, silent unison. They projected a disorienting, sensor-frying wall of incoherent light, not a weaponized beam. They turned every advanced Kylan sensor into a useless flood of white noise. Simultaneously, the miners' carefully placed seismic charges detonated. It was a carefully calculated nudge, not an explosion. It sent a shower of rock and ice tumbling across the fleet's path. The blinded ships instinctively tightened their arrangement to avoid collision, exactly as Renzo's simulations predicted. Then, from deep space construction platforms near Jupiter, Renzo unleashed his masterpiece. He called them net drones. They were larger than the Stingers, and they carried a different payload. As the tangled, blinded Kylan fleet blundered forward, net drones fired. Massive, folded nets of carbon nanotube filament shot out and unfurled in the vacuum of space. The filaments, stronger than steel and thinner than hair, wrapped around the Kylan ships, crippling their delicate sensor arrays, clogging their engine intakes, and, as the final elegant insult, shorting out their external shield emitters as the conductive material settled over their hulls. The proud Kylan fleet, the jewel of the Dominion, was blinded, tangled, and dead in the water without a single human warship having fired a single shot. Just as the Kylan fleet floated in total helpless disarray, multiple hyperlane portals tore open at the system's edge. 50 Graal capital ships, led by the Honor's Fist, materialized in a brutalist wall of armored might. Their weapon ports were open, their targeting systems locked onto the snared Kylan vessels. But they waited, a silent, menacing jury. Ren's voice, calm and clear as a bell, broadcast on an open, system-wide channel, directly to the bridge of the inevitability. "Emissary Vespra," she said, the sound of her voice cutting through the panic on the Kylan bridge. "You came to our system to play a game. You have lost. You have two choices. Surrender your crippled fleet to Commander Krovis, who now possesses the unedited data from his own station and knows the full truth of your betrayal. Or we can power down our nets and leave you to his mercy. Your call." On the bridge of the inevitability, surrounded by reports of total system failure and the terrifying silent presence of the Graal fleet, Vespra saw the trap in its horrifying, beautiful entirety. She'd been outmaneuvered, outthought, outplayed at her own game by a species she dismissed as chaotic. Defeated and publicly humiliated, she did the only thing she could. With her career, her fleet, and her life on the line, she formally surrendered her entire fleet to High Commander Krovis of the Graal Collective. On the bridge of the mighty Centaur, Admiral Park watched the Graal ships begin their methodical, almost ceremonial boarding of the Kylan fleet. He looked at the sensor display of his navy, a scattered mess of cargo ships, mining platforms, and solar arrays, all returned to their normal, mundane duties. For the first time in months, he allowed himself a thin, grim smile. They had changed the entire game without ever firing a shot from a naval vessel. Months later, the galaxy was a different place. The Graal-Kylan war ground to a halt. The balance of power shattered with the Kylan's public disgrace and the catastrophic loss of a major fleet. The two powers were forced into a tense, bitter truce, too busy with internal purges and political fallout to continue their forever war. Dr. Zaila Romas stood on the podium, not on Earth, but at the galactic neutral hub of Alpha Centauri. She was a kingmaker, not a victim. She was instrumental in forming a new third bloc in galactic politics, the Concordance of Armed Neutrals, a mutual defense pact for all the smaller species tired of being pawns for the great powers. Representatives of a dozen species, all emboldened by Earth's example, stood behind her. Renzo Carrick, after much complaining and several attempts to flee back to his workshop, had begrudgingly accepted the title of director of the newly formed Sol System Defensive Command. He was now, officially, in charge of formalizing the procedures for converting civilian infrastructure into a defensive network on a moment's notice, a job he privately referred to as the chief of making things go boom boom in creative ways. And the phrase, the last 4 words of broadcast from a dying habitat, had entered the galactic lexicon. It was a formal, if terrifying, diplomatic term of art. No longer just a viral phrase or a rallying cry for a vengeful species. In intense negotiations, during border disputes, when a larger power began to posture and threaten a smaller one, a new warning was issued. To invoke the Sol Doctrine was the ultimate check. A final, chilling reminder of what happened when you push the quiet, clever, chaotic species in the Sol system too far. It meant, quite simply, you done fucked up. Months later, the 3 architects of that new reality stood together at the observation dome orbiting Earth. The chaos had settled into a new, vigilant peace. Below them, the blue marble turned, serene and unaware of the reputation it had just carved into the galactic bedrock. Admiral Hideo Park, his uniform jacket unbuttoned in a breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable a year ago, gestured to the star-dusted view. The official SDF threat assessment map now includes the real-time location of every deep space freighter, asteroid, mining rig, and orbital comms relay in the system. Our most critical defensive assets aren't warships. They're civilian infrastructure and a shared, encrypted spreadsheet. He shook his head, a slow smile touching his lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. It is the most undisciplined, unprofessional, and utterly terrifying defensive network I've ever seen. It was magnificent. A flickering hologram of Renzo Carrick solidified beside him, still looking like he'd just rolled out of a bunk in his Titan workshop. He held up a steaming mug. Relax, Admiral. Think of us as a planetary immune system. We don't need a fist. We just need 1 trillion angry white blood cells, right? We taught the big kids that trying to punch a fever is a really, really stupid idea. The sarcasm in his voice was still there, but the raw anger was gone, replaced by a weary, protective pride. He was no longer just breaking things for revenge. He was building a shield out of defiance. Dr. Zayla Romas stood by the viewport, her gaze fixed on the planet below. The crushing weight of 30,000 ghosts had not vanished, but it no longer bowed her shoulders. It had been forged into a spine of cold, hard steel. She had failed to keep them safe with peace, so she had helped to build a fortress of consequences. Nia Rostov wanted to bring a simple rock home for her daughter's collection, Romas said, her voice soft but clear. And instead, her final cry gave us a foundation. Not of rock, but of resolve. A promise that we will never again be a line item in someone else's wall. Park looked from Ren's resolute face to Renzo's casually brilliant hologram. The diplomat who learned to fight, the genius who learned to lead, and the soldier who learned to trust the swarm. They were the impossible triad that had saved them all. The galaxy had learned its lesson. It learned that humanity was a species that mourned its dead not just with tears, but with blueprints. It learned that their sprawling, chaotic civilian network could be turned into a weapon of surgical, systemic annihilation with terrifying speed. They learned, and while humans didn't seek galactic conquest or glory, they would collectively, creatively, and absolutely dismantle anyone who dared to spill the blood of their children, their miners, or their explorers. Humanity didn't build an empire of stars. They didn't need one. They simply posted a new, invisible sign at the edge of their system, written in the language of crippled fleets and shattered political dynasties. It was a warning, a promise, and the final, unassailable truth of their existence. We are here. We build. We dream. We love. And if you harm us, we will become the last problem that you ever have.